If marriage is a house, mine's the kind you see burning on the 6 o'clock news while reporters wonder how nobody saw it coming. My name is Tom Ritchie, and I'm 39 years old with the kind of engineering degree that gets you steady work fixing other people's structural problems. The irony isn't lost on me that I spent 15 years making sure buildings don't collapse while my own foundation was crumbling beneath my feet. It started with the small things. Elise coming home later from her events management job, claiming another client dinner ran long. Her phone buzzing at midnight with urgent work messages that made her smile in ways I hadn't seen in months. The way she'd angle her screen away when I walked past, like I was some kind of corporate spy instead of the guy who'd been sharing her bed for 12 years. "You're being paranoid," she'd say, whenever I asked about the late nights. "This is my career we're talking about, Tom. Some of us have ambitions beyond fixing broken pipes in office buildings." That stung because it was partially true. I wasn't climbing any corporate ladders or schmoozing at fancy networking events. I was the guy who made sure the fancy buildings where those events happened didn't fall down. But apparently, that wasn't enough for Elise anymore. The morning everything changed started like any other Tuesday in our Baltimore row house. I was drinking coffee from my favorite mug, the one that said "World's Okayest Engineer," when Elise rushed downstairs in full corporate armor, sharp blazer, heels that could puncture a tire, and enough hairspray to damage the ozone. "I'll be late again tonight," she announced, not looking up from her phone. "Big presentation tomorrow for the Palmer Group account." Matt Palmer, her boss, the guy she'd mentioned increasingly often in recent weeks, always with this little uptick in her voice like she was trying not to smile. Palmer ran one of Baltimore's biggest event planning companies, the kind that organized charity galas where rich people congratulated themselves for caring about poor people. "How late is late?" I asked. "Does it matter? You'll just fall asleep watching those engineering documentaries anyway." Before we dive deeper into this story, I have one small request. Please subscribe, drop a like, comment, and hit that hype button to boost this channel so more people can discover these incredible Reddit stories. She wasn't wrong, but the dismissive tone hit like a slap. This was new, the casual cruelty, the way she talked to me like I was an inconvenience rather than her husband. "I was thinking we could grab dinner somewhere. Haven't done that in a while." Elise finally looked up, and for a second, I saw something flicker across her face. Guilt? Annoyance? Hard to tell. Rain check? This Palmer account could really change things for me. And there it was again. Palmer. After she left, I sat in our kitchen staring at the empty coffee pot and wondering when exactly my wife had started talking about her future in singular terms. When had "we" become "me" without anyone bothering to mention it? My phone buzzed. Drew, my best friend since college, texting his usual morning wisdom. "Coffee at Murphy's? Kelly says I'm driving her crazy and need to get out of the house." Drew worked construction, had hands like baseball mitts, and possessed an uncanny ability to cut through nonsense with the precision of a circular saw. If I was going to talk to anyone about the weird feeling in my gut, it would be him. Murphy's Diner was a 10-minute walk from my house, the kind of place where the coffee was strong enough to wake the sleeping and the waitresses called everyone "Hon" without a trace of irony. Drew was already there, occupying a corner booth and working his way through what looked like half a pig worth of bacon. "You look like someone stole your lunch money," he said as I sat down. "Marriage stuff." "Ah." Drew nodded knowingly. "The kind where you want to talk about it, or the kind where you want to pretend everything's fine while slowly going insane?" "Probably the second one." "Too bad. I'm a good listener when I want to be." He flagged down our waitress. "Coffee for my friend here, and maybe some of those pancakes that'll help him forget his troubles." I found myself telling Drew about the late nights, the secretive phone calls, the way Elise had started treating our house like a hotel she was temporarily staying at. He listened without interrupting, occasionally nodding or making small sounds of understanding. "So, what are you thinking?" he asked when I finished. "I'm thinking I'm probably being paranoid. I'm thinking maybe she's just stressed about work and I'm reading too much into things." "And what's your gut telling you?" My gut was telling me that my wife was having an affair with her boss, but saying it out loud felt like admitting defeat. Like acknowledging that I'd failed at the most basic level of being a husband. "My gut's telling me I should probably pay closer attention." Drew grinned. "Now you're talking sense. Kelly always says women give off signals when something's wrong. Men just suck at reading them." The rest of the day passed in a haze of structural reports and building inspections, but my mind kept drifting back to Elise. By the time I got home that evening, I'd convinced myself I was overthinking everything. Maybe she really was just focused on her career. Maybe I was being the paranoid husband who couldn't handle his wife's success. Then I found her phone. She'd left it on the kitchen counter, plugged into the charger, while she showered upstairs. The screen lit up with a text message, and I saw the name before I could stop myself. Pumper. Pumper. What kind of grown man called himself Pumper? The message preview was just visible enough to make my stomach drop. "Can't wait to see you tonight. Wear that blue dress that drives me." I didn't need to read the rest. The blue dress was the one I'd bought her for our anniversary last year. The one she'd claimed was too fancy for most occasions, but had somehow worn to 3 different work events in the past month. My hands were shaking as I set the phone back down exactly where I'd found it. Upstairs, the shower was still running, and I could hear Elise humming something cheerful and carefree. The sound made me want to punch a wall. Instead, I walked to my home office and sat down at my computer. If Elise wanted to play games, she was about to discover that engineers are very good at solving problems. And right now, my wife had become a problem that needed solving. I opened a new document and started typing, "Evidence log. Day 1. Text message from Pumper referencing blue anniversary dress and evening plans." If I was going to lose my marriage, I was at least going to document exactly how it happened. And if Elise thought she could make a fool out of me while I sat around being the oblivious husband, she was about to learn that Tom Ritchie didn't go down without a fight. The shower stopped running upstairs. I saved the document, cleared my browser history out of habit, and went to the kitchen to start dinner. When Elise came downstairs 20 minutes later, she was wearing the blue dress. "You look nice," I said, keeping my voice neutral. "Special occasion?" "Just want to look professional. First impressions matter in this business." She kissed my cheek, a quick, perfunctory peck, and grabbed her phone from the counter. I watched her face as she checked her messages, saw the tiny smile that played at the corners of her mouth. "Don't wait up," she said. "This could run really late." After she left, I sat in our empty house and tried to figure out when exactly my life had turned into a bad country song. My wife was cheating on me with a man called Pumper. I was talking to myself in an empty kitchen, and somewhere in the distance, I could swear I heard the sound of my dignity packing its bags. But as I sat there in the growing darkness, something else was building alongside the hurt and anger. A cold, calculating part of my brain that approached problems the same way I approached a structural failure, methodically, carefully, and with absolute determination to find the weak points. Elise wanted to play games? Fine. But she was about to discover that her boring, predictable husband had a few moves she'd never seen coming. The next morning, Elise was gone before I woke up. No note, no text, just the lingering smell of her perfume and a coffee mug in the sink that she couldn't be bothered to rinse. I found myself standing in our bedroom, staring at the unmade bed, and wondering if she'd even come home at all. My phone buzzed. A text from Elise. "Stayed at Kara's last night. Too tired to drive after the presentation. See you tonight." Kara, her best friend since college, the kind of woman who treated other people's business like her personal entertainment system. If Elise was confiding in anyone about her affair, it would be Kara. I was still processing this when my phone rang. Drew. You sound like garbage, he said without preamble. Everything okay? Define okay. Fair enough. Listen, Kelly's got book club tonight, which means I'm free to drink beer and provide unsolicited advice about your marriage problems. You interested? Before I could answer, I heard voices outside. Through the front window, I could see Kara's car pulling into my driveway. Elise got out of the passenger seat, laughing at something Kara had said. They stood by the car for several minutes, heads together in the kind of intense conversation that usually meant someone was about to get their life turned upside down. Drew, change of plans. Can you come over here instead? I think I'm about to need backup. On my way. I watched Elise walk up to the front door, her movements casual and relaxed, like she didn't have a care in the world. Like she hadn't spent the night with another man while her husband sat home wondering where his marriage had gone wrong. She came through the door with a bright smile that looked about as genuine as a $3 bill. Morning, honey. Sorry about last night. The presentation ran so late, and then Kara insisted I stay over rather than drive home exhausted. How thoughtful of her. If Elise caught the edge in my voice, she didn't show it. She was already moving toward the stairs, probably planning to shower away any evidence of where she'd really spent the night. Oh, by the way, she called over her shoulder, I'm going out with the girls tonight. Kara's organizing a celebration dinner for landing the Palmer account. The Palmer account? Right. Congratulations, I said. I'm sure Matt Palmer is thrilled. She paused at the bottom of the stairs, and for just a moment, her mask slipped. I saw surprise, maybe even panic, before the bright smile snapped back into place. Mr. Palmer, yes. It's a big win for the whole team. Mr. Palmer. Like they hadn't been texting each other at midnight, like she hadn't worn her anniversary dress to impress him. After she went upstairs, I sat in my kitchen and tried to figure out my next move. The smart thing would be to confront her directly, ask for the truth, and try to work things out like adults. But something told me that ship had already sailed. Elise had made her choice, and now she was just trying to manage the transition as smoothly as possible. Drew arrived 30 minutes later, took one look at my face, and headed straight for the refrigerator. Beer o'clock? He asked, pulling out 2 bottles. It's 10 in the morning. And your wife's cheating on you with a guy named Pumper. I'd say the normal rules don't apply. He had a point. I filled Drew in on the morning's developments while Elise showered upstairs. He listened with the kind of focused attention he usually reserved for blueprints and safety regulations. So what's the plan? He asked. I don't have a plan. I have a wife who's lying to my face and apparently thinks I'm too stupid to notice. Okay, but here's the thing about structural failures, Drew said, settling into his problem-solving mode. They don't happen all at once. There's usually a weak point that gives way first, and then everything else follows. You need to find Elise's weak point. Before I could ask what he meant, we heard footsteps on the stairs. Elise appeared in the kitchen, dressed for work, and radiating the kind of energy that comes from getting away with something. Drew, nice to see you. Her smile was warm and genuine, the way it used to be when she looked at me. How's Kelly? She's good, keeping me in line as usual. That's what we're here for. Elise grabbed her purse and keys, then walked over to kiss me goodbye. It was the same perfunctory peck as the night before, but this time I was paying attention. No warmth, no lingering contact, just going through the motions. I'll be late again tonight, she said. Don't wait up. After she left, Drew and I sat in silence for a few minutes. Finally, he spoke. You know what I think? I think she's testing you, seeing how much she can get away with before you call her on it. And if I don't? Then she'll keep pushing until there's nothing left to push against. The rest of the day crawled by. I tried to focus on work, but my mind kept drifting to Elise and Pumper and the growing certainty that my marriage was over. By the time evening rolled around, I'd made a decision. If Elise wanted to play games, I'd give her a game, but it would be played by my rules. I was sitting in my home office when I heard a car pull into the driveway. Through the window, I could see a silver BMW that definitely wasn't Kara's Honda. The driver got out, a tall man in an expensive suit who moved with the kind of confidence that comes from never being told no. Matt Pumper Palmer, I presumed. He walked up to my front door like he owned the place, and I felt something cold and sharp settle in my chest. This wasn't just about text messages anymore. This was about a man coming to my house to pick up my wife like I didn't exist. I opened the door before he could knock. "You must be Pumper," I said, keeping my voice pleasant and conversational. He looked surprised, maybe even nervous. "I'm sorry?" "Matt Palmer, right? Elise's boss? She calls you Pumper." His face went red, and I could see him trying to figure out how much I knew and how much trouble he was in. "Is Elise ready?" he asked, recovering his composure. "We have dinner reservations. She's upstairs getting ready. Come on in." I stepped aside and watched him enter my house. He looked around with the kind of casual interest that suggested this wasn't his first time here, and I felt that cold sharpness in my chest grow a little larger. "Nice place," he said. "Elise mentioned you're an engineer." "Structural engineer. I fix things that are broken." I let that hang in the air for a moment. "Can I get you something to drink while you wait?" "I'm fine, thanks." We stood there in my living room, two men who both knew exactly what was happening but were pretending otherwise. Palmer kept checking his watch and glancing toward the stairs, while I studied him with the same attention I'd give to a crack in a foundation. He was handsome, in a generic corporate way, the kind of looks that came from good genetics, expensive haircuts, and a personal trainer. Probably drove the BMW like it was a personality trait and had never done a day of manual labor in his life. "So," I said, settling into my favorite chair, "how long have you and Elise been working together?" "About 2 years. She's very talented." "She is. Very dedicated to her work. Sometimes I feel like I barely see her anymore." Palmer's discomfort was becoming more obvious by the minute. He kept shifting his weight and looking everywhere except directly at me. "The events business is demanding," he said. "Lots of evening and weekend work." "I bet. All those late-night planning sessions." Before he could respond, Elise came downstairs. She was wearing a black dress I'd never seen before, and she looked beautiful in a way that made my chest ache. For a moment, I remembered why I'd fallen in love with her in the first place. "Ready to go?" she asked Palmer, then turned to me with that same bright, fake smile. "Don't wait up, honey. This could run late." "Have fun," I said. "Both of you." I watched them walk to his car, saw the way he put his hand on the small of her back as he opened the door for her. They drove away without looking back, leaving me standing in my doorway like the world's biggest fool. But as I closed the door and walked back to my office, I wasn't feeling foolish anymore. I was feeling something much more dangerous, focused. I opened my evidence log and started typing. Day 2. Subject's paramour arrived at marital home to collect subject for business dinner. Subject wearing new dress, displaying obvious intimacy with paramour. Marriage officially over. Revenge planning begins. If Elise thought she could humiliate me in my own house, she was about to learn that her boring, predictable husband had some surprises of his own. I didn't sleep that night. Instead, I sat in my office researching Matt Palmer like I was preparing for the most important structural analysis of my career. By morning, I knew more about Elise's boyfriend than she probably did. Palmer was 42, divorced, and lived in a condo downtown that cost more than most people's houses. His company, Palmer Events, had contracts with half the major corporations in Baltimore. He drove the BMW like it was his personal statement, belonged to an expensive gym, and had a weakness for gambling that showed up in some interesting financial records that weren't exactly public, but weren't exactly private either. Most importantly, he was married. Not divorced, like I'd initially thought, but separated and in the middle of what looked like a very expensive divorce proceeding with a woman named Cheryl Palmer, who had her own successful interior design business. This was useful information. Drew arrived at 7 a.m. with coffee and donuts, taking one look at my face and shaking his head. "You look like you've been hit by a truck. Please tell me you didn't do anything stupid last night." Define stupid. Anything that would get you arrested or divorced faster than you already are. Then no, nothing stupid, just research. I showed him what I'd found about Palmer, watching his expression shift from concern to something that looked almost like admiration. "You know what?" Drew said, settling into the chair across from my desk. "Maybe Elise picked the wrong guy to mess with." "What do you mean?" "I mean, she's used to you being the nice guy, the one who fixes things quietly and doesn't make waves, but you're not feeling very nice right now, are you?" He was right. The hurt was still there, but it was being overshadowed by something colder and more calculating. Elise wanted to play games? Fine. But she was about to discover that I was better at games than she thought. My phone buzzed, a text from Elise. "Staying at Kara's again tonight, big project deadline coming up." I showed the message to Drew, who snorted in disgust. "She's not even trying to be creative. What's the plan?" "I'm going to give her exactly what she wants." Which is freedom. I spent the morning calling in sick to work, then drove to the storage facility across town. For $200 a month, I rented a 10 by 10 unit and spent the rest of the day moving Elise's belongings into it. Not everything. I wasn't trying to get arrested for theft. Just her personal items, her clothes, her books, the things that made our house feel like her home. It was therapeutic in a way I hadn't expected. Each box I packed was a small act of reclaiming my space, my life, my dignity. By the time I finished, our bedroom looked like a hotel room, and I felt lighter than I had in months. I was just loading the last box into my truck when my phone rang. Kara. "Tom, is everything okay? Elise is trying to reach you." "Everything's fine, just doing some spring cleaning." "She said you're not answering your phone." I looked at my phone and saw 7 missed calls and 12 text messages, all from Elise. Apparently, she'd tried to come home for lunch and found her closet empty. "Tell her I'm giving her what she wanted," I said. "Freedom." "Tom, what are you talking about?" "Ask Elise. I'm sure she'll explain everything." I hung up and drove to the storage facility, taking my time unloading the boxes and arranging them neatly in the unit. My phone kept buzzing with increasingly frantic messages from Elise, but I ignored them all. By the time I got home, there were 3 voicemails waiting for me. I played them on speaker while I made myself a sandwich. "Tom, what the heck is going on? Where are all my things? Call me back right now." "This isn't funny, Tom. I need my clothes. I have a presentation tomorrow." "If you don't call me back in the next hour, I'm calling the police. You can't just steal my belongings." I deleted all 3 messages and went back to my sandwich. Let her call the police. Everything I'd moved belonged to her, and I'd put it in storage, not thrown it away. No crime had been committed except the one she'd been committing against our marriage. Drew arrived an hour later, took one look at the house, and started laughing. "You actually did it. You moved her out." I gave her freedom. Isn't that what she wanted? And where exactly is she free to go? That's her problem to solve. My phone rang. Elise, calling for what had to be the 20th time. "Answer it," Drew said. "Let's see how free she feels now." I picked up on the 4th ring. "Hello, Elise." "Tom, what have you done? Where are my things?" "Your things are safe. I put them in storage." "You put them in storage? What gives you the right? The same right you had to stay out all night with your boss. The same right you had to lie to my face for weeks. The same right you had to bring him to our house like I don't exist." Silence on the other end of the line. "I don't know what you think you know," she said finally, "but you're wrong." "Am I?" Then explain the text messages from Pumper. Explain the blue dress. Explain why you've been staying at Kara's instead of coming home to your husband. More silence. We need to talk, she said. We're talking now. In person, like adults. Adults don't lie to each other for months, Elise. Adults don't sneak around behind their spouse's back. Adults don't bring their lovers to the marital home. He's not my... Save it. I saw you two together. I saw the way he touched you, the way you looked at him. I'm not blind, and I'm not stupid, no matter what you think. I could hear her breathing on the other end of the line, could practically feel her trying to figure out how to spin this in her favor. Fine, she said finally. You want to play games? We can play games, but don't think for a second that you're going to come out ahead in this. Is that a threat? It's a promise. She hung up, and I looked at Drew, who was shaking his head in amazement. Well, he said, I think it's safe to say the gloves are off now. Good. I was getting tired of being the only one playing by the rules. That evening, I sat in my newly spacious house and tried to figure out what Elise would do next. She was smart, ambitious, and used to getting her way. She wouldn't take this lying down. Sure enough, at 9 o'clock, I heard a car in the driveway. Through the window, I could see Palmer's BMW, and both he and Elise getting out. They walked up to the front door with the kind of determined stride that suggested they'd come to reclaim what they thought was theirs. I opened the door before they could knock. Evening, folks. How was dinner? Palmer looked uncomfortable, but Elise was radiating anger like heat from a furnace. I want my things back, she said. Now. They're in storage, safe and sound. You had no right. I had every right. This is my house, Elise. My name on the deed, my money that paid for it. You want to live somewhere else? Fine. But you don't get to use my house as your personal hotel while you figure out your next move. Palmer stepped forward, trying to look intimidating. Look, Tom, I think there's been a misunderstanding. No misunderstanding, I said, keeping my voice calm and reasonable. You're screwing my wife. She's been lying to me about it, and now she wants to have her cake and eat it too. The only misunderstanding was thinking I'd sit still for it. Palmer's face went red. Now wait just a minute. No, you wait. You want to play house with my wife? Great. Find your own house to do it in. I started to close the door, but Elise pushed against it. This is ridiculous, Tom. We're both adults. We can work this out. We could have worked it out if you'd been honest with me. Instead, you chose to lie and sneak around and treat me like an idiot. So now we're working it out my way. And what way is that? I smiled, and I could see from her expression that it wasn't a particularly pleasant smile. You wanted freedom, Elise. Now you're free. Free to figure out where you're going to live, free to explain to your friends and family why your marriage fell apart, free to see how long Pumper here is willing to support you when his wife finds out about your relationship. Palmer went pale. His wife? Oh, did Elise not mention that Matt's still married? Separated but not divorced. I'm sure Cheryl Palmer would be very interested to know who her husband's been spending his evenings with. The look of panic that crossed Palmer's face was worth every minute I'd spent researching him. Elise looked back and forth between us, clearly realizing that her carefully constructed fantasy was starting to crumble. You wouldn't, she said. Try me. They left without another word, and I watched them drive away with a sense of satisfaction I hadn't felt in months. Round one to me. But as I locked the door and turned off the lights, I knew this was just the beginning. Elise wasn't the type to give up easily, and Palmer had too much to lose to walk away quietly. The real game was just getting started. The next morning brought a new level of warfare. I woke up to find my truck's tires slashed and liar spray-painted across my front door in bright red letters. Classy. Drew arrived to find me hosing off the paint, took one look at the scene, and whistled low. Looks like someone's not taking their newfound freedom very well. Good thing I have security cameras, I said, pointing to the small devices I'd installed under the eaves last month. Originally meant to deter package thieves, they'd captured everything in perfect high-definition detail. Please tell me you got them on video. Oh, I got them, both of them. Palmer was the lookout while Elise did the artwork. Drew grinned. What's the plan? I'm thinking it's time to expand our audience. I spent the morning getting new tires and filing a police report, making sure to mention that the vandalism was related to my ongoing marital problems. The officer was sympathetic and professional, and he seemed very interested in the security footage. We'll need copies of the video for evidence, he said, and you might want to consider a restraining order if this escalates. I'm hoping it doesn't come to that. But even as I said it, I was already planning my next move. If Elise wanted to play dirty, I was happy to oblige, but I was going to play smarter. That afternoon, I drove to Palmer Events' downtown office building. It was one of those glass and steel towers that looked impressive from the outside, but probably had terrible acoustics and climate control problems. I'd worked on similar buildings, and they all had the same weakness: thin walls and poor sound insulation. I didn't go inside. Instead, I sat in my truck across the street and waited. At 5:30, employees started streaming out of the building, and I spotted Palmer's BMW in the parking garage. 20 minutes later, he emerged with Elise at his side. They looked comfortable together, walking close and talking in the easy way of people who'd moved past the awkward early stages of an affair. Palmer had his hand on her back again, and Elise was laughing at something he'd said. I followed them at a distance, curious to see where they'd go. The answer surprised me. A small Italian restaurant in Little Italy, the kind of place with checkered tablecloths and wine bottles for candles. It looked romantic and intimate, exactly the sort of spot you'd take someone you were trying to impress. I parked across the street and called Drew. Feel like Italian food tonight? Since when do you eat Italian? Since I need a dining companion for a little reconnaissance mission. Drew arrived 20 minutes later, and we walked into the restaurant like any other two friends looking for a good meal. Palmer and Elise were seated in a corner booth, so absorbed in each other that they didn't notice us taking a table with a clear view of their romantic dinner. This feels very spy movie, Drew said, studying his menu. Are we going to follow them to a hotel next? Nothing that dramatic. I just want to observe their natural behavior. What I observed was enlightening. Palmer was clearly smitten, hanging on Elise's every word and touching her hand across the table whenever possible. Elise was playing the part of the sophisticated woman perfectly, all subtle smiles and meaningful glances. They looked happy. That should have hurt, but instead, it just made me more determined. You know what I think? Drew said, cutting into his chicken parmesan. I think she's in for a rude awakening. How so? Look at him. He's got that new relationship energy, all excited and romantic. But what happens when reality sets in? When she needs a place to live permanently? When his divorce gets messy and expensive? When his wife finds out about Elise and uses it against him in court? Drew had a point. Palmer was playing with fire, and he probably didn't even realize it. We finished our dinner and left before Palmer and Elise, but not before I'd gotten several good photos of them together with my phone. Insurance, in case I needed it later. The next few days passed quietly. Too quietly. Elise had stopped calling, stopped texting, stopped trying to get into the house. Either she'd given up, or she was planning something bigger. I got my answer on Friday evening. I was sitting in my office when my phone rang. An unknown number. Tom Ritchie? Speaking. This is Jennifer Walsh from Channel 11 News. I understand you're involved in a domestic dispute that might be of interest to our viewers. My stomach dropped. I'm sorry? We received a tip about a local engineer who's been stalking and harassing his estranged wife and her employer. The caller suggested we might want to look into it. Clever. Very clever. Elise was trying to control the narrative, paint me as the unstable husband who couldn't handle his wife's success. I think there's been a misunderstanding, I said carefully. I'm not stalking anyone. But you did vandalize your own property and blame it on your wife? You did move her belongings out of your shared home without her permission? I could hear the reporter's pen scratching against paper, could practically see the story taking shape in her mind. Unhinged husband terrorizes successful businesswoman and her boss. No comment, I said, and hung up. But the damage was already done. Within hours, my phone was ringing constantly with calls from reporters, neighbors, and people I hadn't heard from in years. Someone had leaked my name and address, and suddenly my private business was becoming very public. Drew arrived that evening to find me sitting in my dark living room, ignoring the ringing phone. "Saw the news van outside," he said. "This is bad, isn't it? She's trying to destroy my reputation before I can destroy hers. So what's the plan?" I looked at my friend, this loyal, straightforward man who'd stood by me through everything, and felt a surge of gratitude mixed with determination. "The plan is to stop playing defense and start playing offense. If Elise wants a public battle, she's going to get one. But it's going to be fought on my terms, with my evidence, and my version of the truth. What do you need me to do?" "Help me make some phone calls. It's time for Cheryl Palmer to learn about her husband's extracurricular activities." Drew's grin was sharp as a blade. "Now you're talking." We spent the next hour researching Cheryl Palmer, finding her contact information, and crafting exactly the right approach. She deserved to know what her husband was doing, and I deserved to have an ally in this fight. The call was brief and to the point. I introduced myself, explained the situation, and offered to provide evidence of her husband's affair. Cheryl listened without interrupting, asked a few pointed questions, and then thanked me for my honesty. "I suspected something was going on," she said. "Matt's been acting differently lately, more secretive, more defensive. I appreciate you reaching out." "I'm sorry to be the bearer of bad news." "Don't be. I'd rather know the truth than live with suspicion. And Tom, if there's anything I can do to help you through this, please let me know. We're both victims of their selfishness." After I hung up, Drew raised his beer in a mock toast. To new alliances and old-fashioned justice. To making sure the truth comes out. We clinked bottles, and I felt something shift inside me. For weeks, I'd been reacting to Elise's moves, responding to her attacks, playing defense while she controlled the game. But now I had allies, evidence, and a clear understanding of exactly what I was fighting for. Not just my marriage, that was already over. Not just my dignity, though that mattered too. I was fighting for the truth, and I was going to win. The final confrontation was coming, and I intended to be ready for it. Saturday morning brought rain and a sense of impending resolution. I woke up early, made coffee, and sat in my kitchen watching the water run down the windows while I planned my endgame. My phone had finally stopped ringing. The reporters had moved on to other stories, and the neighbors had apparently gotten bored with the drama. Even Elise seemed to have gone quiet, which made me more nervous than all her previous attacks combined. Drew arrived at 9 with donuts and news. "Kelly heard from her friend who works at Palmer Events," he said, settling into his usual chair. "Apparently there's been some drama at the office. Cheryl Palmer showed up yesterday afternoon and had a very loud conversation with her husband in front of half the staff." "How loud?" "Loud enough that security had to escort her out, and loud enough that everyone now knows about Matt and Elise." This was better than I'd hoped. Office gossip was like wildfire. Once it started spreading, there was no stopping it. "There's more," Drew continued. "Kelly's friend says Elise didn't come into work yesterday. Word is she's been suspended pending an investigation into her relationship with Palmer." I felt a surge of satisfaction. Elise's career had always been her priority, her source of identity and self-worth. Having it threatened would hit her harder than any personal attack. "So what's next?" Drew asked. "Now we wait. Elise is going to have to make a move soon. She's got no job, no place to live, and a boyfriend who's probably more liability than asset at this point." I didn't have to wait long. At noon, my doorbell rang. Through the window, I could see Elise standing on my front porch, looking smaller and more vulnerable than I'd seen her in years. She was alone. I opened the door, but didn't invite her in. "Hello, Elise? Can we talk? Please?" She looked tired, defeated. Her usual polished appearance was gone, replaced by jeans and a sweater that had seen better days. For a moment, I almost felt sorry for her. Almost. "What do you want to talk about?" "About us. About fixing this mess." "There is no us anymore, Elise. You made that choice when you decided to have an affair. It wasn't supposed to happen. It just did. These things happen, Tom. People make mistakes." "Mistakes? You've been lying to me for months. You brought him to our house. You tried to destroy my reputation when I found out. That's not a mistake. That's a pattern of choices." She stepped closer, and I could see tears in her eyes. Real ones, not the crocodile tears she'd used during previous arguments. "I know I messed up. I know I hurt you. But we can work through this. We've been together for 12 years, Tom. That has to count for something." It did count for something, right up until you decided it didn't. "What do you want from me? What would it take to fix this?" I looked at my wife. This woman I'd loved and trusted and built a life with, and felt nothing but emptiness where the anger used to be. "I want you to tell me the truth, all of it. When it started, how long it's been going on, whether you ever planned to end it, or if you were just going to keep lying to me indefinitely." Elise wiped her eyes and took a shaky breath. "It started 3 months ago, after the company retreat in Ocean City. We'd been working late, had a few drinks, and one thing led to another. I told myself it was just a one-time thing, but then it kept happening." "And you never thought to tell me?" "I didn't want to hurt you, and I didn't want to end my career over a stupid affair. So you decided to have both, the marriage and the boyfriend. It wasn't like that. What was it like, Elise? Because from where I'm standing, it looks like you were planning to keep lying to me until you figured out which option was more profitable." She flinched like I'd slapped her, but she didn't deny it. "Matt's marriage is over anyway," she said. "His wife filed for divorce months ago. We were going to wait until everything was settled, then figure out what we wanted to do. And in the meantime, I was supposed to just keep being the oblivious husband? I hoped you wouldn't find out." The honesty was almost refreshing after weeks of lies and manipulation. "Well, I did find out, and now everyone else knows too. How's that working out for you?" Fresh tears started flowing. "I lost my job, Tom. They suspended me pending an investigation, but we both know I'm never going back there. And Matt, he's talking about reconciling with his wife to protect his business. So you're alone. So I'm alone." We stood there in the rain, looking at each other across the wreckage of our marriage. Part of me wanted to invite her in, to try to salvage something from the disaster we'd created. But the larger part of me, the part that had been systematically lied to and betrayed and humiliated, felt nothing but cold satisfaction. "I'm sorry it worked out this way," I said, and meant it. "But you made your choices, Elise. Now you get to live with the consequences." "What about my things? My clothes, my books, everything you put in storage?" "I'll give you the key and the address. You can take whatever you want." "And the house?" "What about it?" "I have a legal right to half of everything we built together." "Then call a lawyer and we'll sort it out properly. But you're not living here anymore, and you're not using this place as your backup plan while you figure out your next move." She nodded slowly, accepting what we both knew was inevitable. "For what it's worth," she said, "I did love you. I do love you. I got lost somewhere along the way." "I know, and I loved you too. But love isn't enough when there's no trust left." I gave her the storage unit information and watched her walk back to Kara's car, which I now noticed was parked at the end of the driveway. She looked back once before getting in, and I raised my hand in a small wave goodbye. After they drove away, I stood in my doorway for a long time, watching the rain and thinking about the strange turns life takes. 6 months ago, I'd been a married man with a stable life and a clear future. Now I was divorced in all but legal terms, living alone in a house that felt too big and too quiet. But I wasn't unhappy. Hurt, yes. Disappointed, certainly. But not unhappy. Drew appeared beside me, having watched the whole conversation from the kitchen window. "How do you feel?" he asked. "Free," I said, and realized it was true. For the first time in months, I feel free. "So, what's next?" I looked at my friend, this good man who'd stood by me through the worst period of my adult life, and smiled. "Next, we finish that beer you brought yesterday. Then maybe we order pizza and watch something stupid on TV. And tomorrow I start figuring out what the rest of my life looks like." Sounds like a plan. We went back inside, leaving the rain and the past where they belonged, behind us. The game was over, and I had won. Not because I'd destroyed Elise or ruined her life, but because I'd refused to let her destroy mine. I'd stood up for myself, fought for the truth, and come out the other side with my dignity intact. It wasn't the ending I'd planned when I got married 12 years ago, but it was an ending I could live with, and sometimes that's the best victory you can ask for. The rain kept falling, washing everything clean.